I refused to cover my brother's $42K gambling debt, so Mom sold my vintage Mustang without asking. She smirked and said, "Your brother is worth more than you." I didn't argue. I just asked for the buyer's name. The next morning, someone pounded on their door and shouted, "Open up." The morning my mother sold my car, I was 40 minutes away doing a site inspection on a hail claim. She had the buyer's number saved in her phone under Mustang Guy. She had saved it 3 weeks before I ever said no to anything. I did not know that yet, but by the time I found out, I already had everything I needed. My name is Cole. I am 31 years old. I work as an auto insurance claims adjuster out of Memphis, Tennessee, and I have spent the last 4 years of my life restoring a 1969 Ford Mustang Fastback in my apartment garage on Ellsworth Avenue. I know what a title document looks like. I know what a fraudulent transfer of personal property looks like. I know both of those things the way a plumber knows what a leak sounds like inside a wall. My mother did not know that I knew. That is the only reason any of this works. Let me tell you about Donnie first, because you cannot understand the car without understanding my brother. Donnie is 28. He has the kind of face that makes people want to loan him money, which is unfortunate for everyone involved, because Donnie has never once paid anything back. I am not saying that to be cruel. I am saying it because it is a documented fact across our family's last 12 years. My mother would call it bad luck. I would call it a pattern. I work in insurance, so I am professionally required to have opinions about patterns. Donnie's first significant financial event happened when he was 19 and borrowed $3.00 from my mother's savings account to invest in what he described as a sure thing. The sure thing turned out to be a man named Randy who sold nutritional supplements out of a storage unit in Collierville. Randy moved to Florida shortly after receiving Donnie's $3,000. Donnie called it a learning experience. My mother called it a rough start. The second event was a used car dealership he started at 22 with money our Uncle Phil lent him. The dealership lasted 7 months. Uncle Phil has not spoken at Christmas in 4 years. The third, fourth, and fifth events I will skip for time, but they share a structural similarity. Someone in the family gave Donnie money, Donnie converted it into something that no longer existed, and everyone agreed it was bad luck. Here is the thing about Donnie that took me a long time to understand. He is not malicious. He is not calculating. He is something rarer and in some ways worse. A person who has been so completely insulated from the consequences of his own choices that he has genuinely never had to develop a relationship with cause and effect. He walks through the world with a particular kind of ease that only comes from never having had to pay for anything yourself. My mother built that in him, brick by brick, payment by payment, across every year I can remember watching it happen. And she used my compliance to do it. I had been the stable one since I was about 17, the one who paid for his own things, found his own apartment, filed his own taxes the first time, without asking anyone for help, and got a refund he did not tell anyone about because it felt private in a way he could not explain. The one who asked for nothing and expected nothing, because asking and expecting had never produced anything worth waiting for anyway. I was the one my mother pointed at when relatives asked how she was doing, because I reflected well and required nothing. I want to be clear about what that cost. Not the money, though there was money. Rent I covered for Donnie twice when my mother asked me to. Car insurance payments I absorbed without announcement. The loan for the dealership that my Uncle Phil fronted, I was the one who helped structure the terms because my mother said I was good with numbers. And I sat across from Uncle Phil and explained why this was a reasonable risk. And I believed it when I said it, and I was wrong. And I have never forgotten that I was the instrument of that particular piece of family damage. I had understood for a long time that this was the arrangement. I had accepted most of it the way you accept weather. Not because I had no objections, but because I could not figure out what saying them would change, and the cost of saying them out loud always seemed larger than the cost of absorbing one more thing quietly. What I had not accepted going into that year was that my acceptance had a limit. The car was not the limit. The car was the moment I found out the limit had been there the whole time. By the time Donnie's gambling debt reached $42,000, his track record was established enough that I cannot say I was surprised by the number. The debt belonged to a man named Ferris, who I will describe only as the kind of person who makes phone calls at 7 in the morning and is very specific about what he expects in return. Donnie called our mother crying on a Thursday. My mother called me on a Friday. I said no. I want to be precise about how I said it, because my mother later described it as cruel and callous, which I think is an interesting characterization for a single 2-letter word. I told her I was sorry Donnie was in trouble. I told her I hoped he found a solution. I told her that I had worked for every dollar in my account and that Donnie's decisions were not a debt I was willing to absorb. I said it calmly, which I think made it worse. She said I had more stability than he did, which was true. She said families take care of each other, which was also true but had historically meant that I took care of Donnie while Donnie took care of Donnie's immediate wants. I told her I loved her. I told her we would talk soon. I hung up. That conversation happened on a Friday evening. The car was gone by the following Tuesday. I want to tell you about the Mustang, because it is the kind of thing that matters more in the telling than the price. I bought it at 26 from an estate sale in Bartlett. The previous owner had started a restoration in the 80s and then stopped somewhere around the front suspension, the way projects do when life decides it has other plans. She was dark green under 4 layers of primer, no interior, and an engine that had not run in 11 years. The seller's daughter told me it was junk. She was not entirely wrong. I paid $8, $400 cash, and drove her home on a flatbed. For 4 years after that, every weekend I was not working a claim, I was in the garage on Ellsworth. I sourced parts from 3 different states. I sent the engine to a specialist in Arkansas who had a 6-month waiting list and was worth every week of it. I learned upholstery from a man named Vincent who runs a shop on Summer Avenue and has been doing that work since before I was born. He let me sit with him on 4 Saturday afternoons and watch before he let me touch anything. By the 5th Saturday, I was doing the driver's seat on my own. He said I had good hands for it. That was one of the better compliments I have received from anyone in several years. I documented everything. Not because I knew I would need it someday. Because I am built the way I am built and I cannot start a project without a folder. Every part receipt, every labor hour, every paint code, every mechanical invoice. I kept it all in a red accordion folder I bought at the drugstore on Poplar, and I kept the folder on the shelf above the driver's side door so I would see it every time I went in there. By the spring of last year, she ran. Charcoal gray with a black hood stripe, 302 cubic inches of rebuilt engine, leather interior I had done myself over 2 weekends. I drove her maybe once a month, windows down on a Sunday, no particular destination. She was one of the few things in my life that was entirely mine. No shared history, no family claim, no complicated ownership story. I had bought her and fixed her, and she was mine on paper and in every other way. My mother had seen her exactly twice. She had saved the buyer's number in her phone 3 weeks before I refused to pay Donnie's debt. I did not know that yet. What I knew, on that Tuesday afternoon, was that my garage door was standing open when I got home from the hail claim, and the garage was empty. The bill of sale was on my workbench, not tucked under anything, not face down. Set in the center of the bench in the spot where I usually rest my coffee cup. In the exact place my mother would have known I would look first, which tells you something about the confidence involved. I picked it up and read it once, then again. Sale of 1969 Ford Mustang Fastback. Seller listed as my mother. Her address on Teller Road, not Ellsworth, not my name, not my address. Buyer, Walt Pereira, a Germantown address. Sale price, $27,500 cash. Dated that morning. I set it down. I photographed both sides with my phone. I stood in the empty garage for about 60 seconds, looking at the shelf above the driver's side door, where the accordion folder was not. She had taken it. The registration, the title copy I kept there, every document I had stored with the car. I want to tell you what an empty garage looks like when something you built is gone. I know that sounds like I am about to get sentimental, and I am not, exactly. I am trying to describe something specific. The space a car leaves is shaped like the car. The oil stain on the concrete. The orange extension cord I kept draped on a hook to the left of where the driver's door would sit. The 4-inch square of blue painter's tape I had stuck to the wall at mirror height 4 years ago, so I would know where to pull up without hitting it. All of that's still there, the car not there. It is a particular kind of absence that has dimensions and a specific outline. I was not surprised by it. I want to be clear about that. I had known, in the way you know a thing before you are ready to fully know it, that something like this was likely. I had moved everything else. I had been watching. And I had still stood in a garage with the wrong kind of shape in it, looking at a shelf where a folder was not. I took the bill of sale off the workbench. I photographed it again to make sure I had both sides clean. And then I went inside and called her. She answered on the second ring, which meant she had been waiting. I asked where the car was. She told me she had sold it. She said it with the calm of someone reporting a completed errand. She said Walt was a very nice man who had been looking for exactly that model, and she had gotten a good price. She said $27,500 was more than I had paid for it. She was not factoring in 4 years, but I let that go. I asked how she had gotten into my garage. She still had the spare key from when I had asked her to water my plants 2 summers ago. I had forgotten about the key. That is the one thing she did that I had not anticipated. And it is the detail that still comes back to me at quiet moments. I asked her why. And she delivered the line I will hear in the back of my head for the rest of my life. She said, "Your brother is worth more than you. Always has been." She said it with a settled finality, not angry, not ashamed, certain. The way you state a fact that has always been true and you are tired of not saying out loud. I did not react to it. Not because it did not land, but because reacting to it right then was not the move. I asked for the buyer's name. She said Walt Pereira. She spelled it. I thanked her, said I would be in touch, and hung up. I sat on my workbench for a few minutes, then I opened my laptop. Here is something about my job that I had not fully appreciated until that evening. I am an auto insurance claims adjuster. My daily work involves pulling vehicle history reports, VIN checks, and title records through the state DMV database. I have a professional subscription. I use it approximately 9 times a day. It has stopped feeling like a tool and started feeling like a reflex, the way a doctor stops noticing that they wash their hands before they touch anything. I typed in the VIN. I had it memorized the way you memorize numbers you have written on 40 different forms over 4 years. The title record came back in under a minute. Owner of record, my full legal name, my address on Ellsworth. No co-owner, no lien holder. No secondary interest of any kind. My mother's name was not on the title and had never been on the title and had no legal connection to that vehicle in any documentation in the state of Tennessee. I sat with that for a moment. What she had done was sign a bill of sale as the seller of a vehicle she did not own, transferring it to a buyer for cash consideration. That is not a complicated family disagreement. That is not a gray area you talk through over dinner. That is a fraudulent transfer of personal property. It is a crime. It is also specifically the type of claim I investigate and document for a living. I processed that irony for approximately 4 seconds and then started making a list. The first call was to Simone, a former colleague who now works at the county DMV office and is the most competent person I know within a 3-state radius. I explained the situation in 2 sentences. She put me on hold for 90 seconds and came back with confirmation that no title transfer had been submitted that day. The sale had been done with a handwritten bill of sale in cash, which is legally permissible in Tennessee for private transactions. But completing the registration required submitting that bill of sale alongside the original title. The original title was in the accordion folder my mother had taken. Walt Pereira had paid $27, $500 for a car he could not legally register. I thanked Simone, told her I might need her as a professional contact in a few days, and hung up. I spent the rest of that evening reconstructing the documentation. I keep scanned copies of everything on my personal laptop, backed up in 2 places, because I handle documents the way my profession requires me to handle documents. Title copy from my fireproof box. Every receipt in the accordion folder, scanned and filed by date going back to the estate sale. The engine rebuild invoice from Arkansas. Vincent's upholstery receipts, paint invoices, hardware, everything. Total documented investment, $31,400. I pulled 3 comparable sales to establish market value. A fully restored 1969 Mustang Fastback in the condition I had brought her to was worth $38. Zero conservatively. She had sold mine for $27,500. I opened a new document and put the numbers in a column. Then I started a timeline. Every event with a date. The first phone call about Donnie's debt. My refusal on a Friday, the garage empty on a Tuesday. I did not yet know about the 3 weeks of prior planning, the buyer number saved before any of this started. I would find that out later, and it would reframe every event on the timeline. But I had enough to move. I want to be honest with you about something before the next part, because the story does not go the direction most people expect. I had been watching this develop for 3 weeks before the car was gone, not with any clear plan. Just the instinct that comes from knowing someone long enough to recognize the particular way they change the subject when they have already made a decision. I had heard my mother's voice shift on 2 phone calls about Donnie's debt. I had heard numbers discussed in the careful tone of someone arranging rather than reporting. I could not name what was forming, but I could feel the temperature of it. So I had been quietly moving things. My laptop, my grandfather's pocket watch, the box with my personal financial documents, and the folder with my lease and my accounts. My grandmother's ring that I keep in a drawer and have no plans for but cannot lose. I moved everything I could identify as irreplaceable out of any space where my mother had access. Everything except the car, because the car was in my own garage at my own apartment, and I had decided that was safe. I was wrong about one specific thing I had not checked. 6 months earlier, when I added my mother as an emergency contact on my lease renewal, the property manager had given her a key copy as standard procedure. I did not know this until she told me. She had used it while I was 40 minutes away on a site inspection because she had checked my work calendar, which I share with the family, and knew I would not be back until after 3. I am telling you this because I want you to understand that I went into what came next as a person who had been careful and still got one thing wrong. The one gap I did not check was the one she walked through. That specific kind of wrong sits differently than being blindsided. It does not feel like shock. It feels like a math error you should have caught and are now correcting under time pressure. But there is a significant distance between a gap in your preparation and having no options at all. The size of that distance is exactly as large as what you know. I had the title. I had the professional database I use 9 times a day at work. I had 4 years of documented receipts. I had a restoration invoice that told anyone who needed to know exactly what the car was worth and exactly who had built it into that value. And I had a buyer in Germantown who was very shortly going to discover that the car he purchased could not be legally registered in his name. I want to pause here because I think this is the moment people expect the anger to announce itself. They expect me to call her back and deliver a speech about what is coming. I did not do that. I went to work the next morning and ran 4 hail claims and ate a sandwich at my desk and said nothing to anyone about the Mustang. I have a kind of focus that gets cleaner, not noisier, when something genuinely wrong happens. The anger does not disappear. It just becomes a background process, running quiet while the front of my mind handles the sequence correctly. I have watched people burn good cases by acting on emotion ahead of evidence. In claims, I have seen it 100 times. Someone who had every right to be made whole, who had the documentation to prove it, who let the feeling move faster than the facts and handed the other side an argument they would not otherwise have had. I was not going to do that. Stay with me. What I did with the buyer's name is the part of this story that carries all the real weight. I did not call my mother the next day. I went to work. I ran 4 hail claims and a rear-end collision and ate lunch at my desk and said nothing to anyone about the Mustang. This is the part people find strange when I tell it. They expect me to say I was devastated, could not focus, was barely holding it together. I was not fine exactly, but I have a specific kind of focus that sharpens rather than blunts when something genuinely wrong happens. My thinking gets sequential, my hands stay still. On the drive home that evening, I thought about Walt Pereira. Walt had paid $27, $500 in cash for a car he could not register. He had a bill of sale signed by someone who was not the legal owner. He had a vehicle sitting in his garage or driveway that was, as far as the state of Tennessee was concerned, still mine. Walt Pereira was not a villain in this story. He was a man who had been defrauded by my mother and almost certainly did not know the full shape of it yet. I found his address on the bill of sale. I cross-referenced it against county assessor records, which are public, and confirmed a residential address in Germantown. Private buyer, personal use. I drafted him a letter that night, professional in tone, no drama. I introduced myself as the legal owner of record. I explained that the person who sold him the vehicle was not on the title and had no legal authority to transfer ownership. I explained what that meant for registration. I described a clean path to resolution. I gave him my phone number and my work email. I mailed it with a return receipt. He called me at 8:47 the next morning. He had already been to the DMV. They had already flagged the title problem. He had been trying to reach my mother for 2 days. She had stopped answering. Walt was not calm on the phone. I will not reproduce the specific language because some of it was creative in ways that do not age well, but the substance was clear. $27,500 in cash, a worthless bill of sale, a car he could not register, and a seller who had disappeared. He wanted to know his options. I told him I could offer something better than options. I told him I wanted my car back. I would return his $27, $500 in full the moment the vehicle was in my possession. The sale was fraudulent. He had been wronged. I was prepared to file a formal complaint with the state attorney general's office, and I needed him to support that process. He asked how long it would take. I told him 4 days. He said he would give me 3. I spent those 3 days the same way I spend a complicated claim. Every document in the right order. The original title. The fraudulent bill of sale. Walt's DMV rejection letter, which he scanned and emailed me that afternoon. The restoration invoice at $31,400. A market valuation document with 3 comparable sales attached. A timeline from the first phone call about Donnie's debt to the moment I photographed the empty garage. I sent the complete file to a consumer protection attorney whose card I had kept from a professional seminar 2 years earlier. She called me the following morning and said I had built a cleaner case file than most attorneys in her building. I told her I worked in claims. She said she could tell. She agreed to file a formal complaint with the Tennessee Division of Consumer Affairs citing fraudulent transfer of personal property on behalf of both Walt and myself. I asked if she could tell me the approximate date investigators would make contact with the seller. She said she could not give me an exact date. I told her that was fine. I just needed to be there when they arrived. I want to stop for a second here, because I know this is the part where you are wondering whether I was confident or terrified or some combination of both. The honest answer is neither. I was focused. I had spent 3 days building the most accurate picture of the situation I could build, which is what I do every day in a different context. And the picture was clear. The car was mine on paper. The sale was invalid. The buyer was cooperative. The documentation was clean. The complaint was filed. What I did not yet know, sitting in my apartment the night before I went to Teller Road, was that my mother had already called the family, that she had assembled an audience, that she had decided the best move was to have witnesses when I came to face what I had done to her. I did not know that yet, but I had known her for 31 years, and thinking about it now, I should have expected it. If you have ever been the person in your family that everyone expects to absorb something quietly and then forgive it quickly, you already know the feeling I am describing. The one where you have finally stopped absorbing and you are watching from the outside of it for the first time and you are not entirely sure what to do with your hands. Subscribe so you are there when I walk into that room, because the shape of what was waiting for me on Teller Road was different than either of us expected. I repaid Walt Pereira by bank transfer within 48 hours of our first call. I picked up the Mustang the following Saturday. Walt met me in his driveway and helped me connect a jump cable because the battery had gone flat sitting idle. He shook my hand when I left and said he hoped I got the full amount back from whoever had done this to both of them. I told him I thought I probably would. The Mustang went back into my garage on Ellsworth that Saturday evening. I sat on the workbench with a coffee for a while and let myself feel the thing I had been postponing all week. Not triumph, not satisfaction. Something older and quieter than both. The feeling of something returned to exactly where it belongs after being in the wrong place. The accordion folder, which my mother had taken, and which Walt found tucked under the passenger seat when he cleaned the car, went back on the shelf above the driver's side door. I had one thing left to do. My mother called on a Sunday 6 days after I had retrieved the car. She did not know I had retrieved it. She did not know about Walt or the attorney or the filed complaint. She called in the checking-in tone she uses when she wants to know whether a problem has resolved itself without her having to address it directly. She asked how I was doing. I told her I was well. She asked if I had had time to think about things. I told her I had. She said she hoped I understood that what she did was for the family. She said Donnie was in a better place now, and she hoped I could find it in myself to move forward. She said these things with the ease of a woman who has paid a bill and considers the account settled. I told her I had something I wanted to show her and that I would come by Tuesday evening. She said that sounded fine and offered to make dinner. I told her not to go to any trouble. I called Donnie separately, not to warn him, just to confirm he would be there. He said he would stop by. He said things had been better since the debt situation was handled. He said it the way people say things when they know they should feel worse about them than they do. I said I was glad to hear it. I did not tell either of them that there would be a different kind of knock at the door before I arrived. The investigators from the Division of Consumer Affairs arrived at 4:30. I know this because my mother called me at 4:32, 4 registers higher than Sunday, asking what was happening. I told her I was 10 minutes away. She said there were 2 men at her door with identification. I told her I would explain when I got there. She said, "Cole, what did you do?" I told her I had documented the facts. Then I hung up. My mother had called the family before she called me. By the time I pulled onto Teller Road, there were 4 cars in the driveway. Her sister Viv, Donnie, a neighbor named Gerald who has been tangentially involved in every Teller Road situation for 17 years. Donnie's girlfriend, who I will not name because she was the only one present who had the grace to look uncomfortable about being there. My mother had assembled witnesses to watch me face consequences for what I had done to her. I had been counting on exactly that. I parked on the street. I took the accordion folder off the passenger seat. I took my coffee cup from the cup holder. I walked up the driveway. The 2 investigators were on the porch. One nodded at me. We had spoken twice by phone. I nodded back and went inside. The living room had the arrangement of a room prepared for a different kind of conversation. My mother stood near the fireplace, which she does when she wants the visual height of the room behind her. Donnie was on the couch with his arms crossed. Aunt Viv had claimed the armchair by the window. Gerald was in the corner, and he already had the expression of a man calculating how quickly he could leave without being noticed. My mother looked at me and said, loud enough that the room had no doubt she intended it to be heard, "Cole, I want you to explain to everyone here why you called the government on your own family." I put my coffee cup on the side table. I put the accordion folder on the coffee table. I pulled a chair from the corner, set it where I could see everyone in the room, and sat down. I said nothing for a moment. I let the quiet sit beside the question she had asked. Letting everyone feel the temperature of it, Donnie said. This is insane. She sold a car. It is just a car. Aunt Viv had the expression she has used at every family gathering since I was 9, which is the expression of someone reserving judgment while leaning in one direction. Gerald said nothing. Gerald had already decided this was not worth what he had thought it was worth when he agreed to come. I opened the folder. I did not begin with a speech. Speeches get interrupted. I began with the first document. I set the vehicle title on the coffee table and turned it so the room could read it. My name at the top, my address, one legal owner. Clear, I said. Her name is not on this document. Has never been on this document. My mother said that she was my mother and that family property was family property. I put the bill of sale next to the title, her name on the seller line. The fraudulent transfer in plain print. The price. The date, I said. She signed a seller on a vehicle she did not legally own. In Tennessee, that is a fraudulent transfer of personal property. Donnie said she was just trying to help him. I put Walt Pereira's DMV rejection letter on the table. I said the buyer could not register the car. The DMV flagged the transfer. He spent 4 days trying to reach the seller, and she stopped answering his calls. The room was quiet in a way it had not been when I came in. I put the restoration invoice on the table last, $31,400. Every receipt, every vendor, every date. 4 years of weekends and a column of numbers. I said market value on the date of sale was $38,000. She sold it for $27,500. My mother said, "You would not help your brother." I looked at her and said, "You saved the buyer's number in your phone 3 weeks before I said no to anything." That sentence landed the way a quiet one does when a room has been expecting loud ones. You could hear it settle. My aunt's expression shifted. The lean came back toward center. My mother said that was not relevant. I said, "It tells me the car was on your list before I refused anything." The refusal was the excuse, not the reason. Donnie said, "Mom, did you?" He stopped there. She looked at him. I watched her calculate the things she calculates in every family situation that has gotten expensive. What could be repaired, what could not, where the money currently was, whether it could be moved. And then I watched her understand where the money was. She said, "I already gave Donnie the money." She said it to the investigators, as if they could help with the logistics. She said the $27,500. I gave it to him already, to pay the debt. So if Walt wants it back. The investigator, with the composure of a man who has heard this sentence in many forms, said, "Ma'am, that will be part of the civil process. We will need to go through the documentation with you." Donnie stood up from the couch. He said, "Mom, how much do you need?" She looked at her son. The one worth more than me. The one the Mustang had been sold to protect. And the answer written on her face was $27,500, which was the exact number she had paid to save him from his own decisions, which was now owed to a man in Germantown who had done nothing wrong, which meant the debt she had erased was sitting back in the living room on Teller Road wearing a different name. I picked up my coffee cup. I picked up my accordion folder. I looked at my mother once, not with anger, which she expected, not with satisfaction, which she feared. I looked at her the way I look at a claim file when I have found the error, documented it, and forwarded it to the correct parties. Acknowledged. Complete, I said. The attorney's contact information is in the copy I left on the table. There is one for you and one for the investigators, I said. I have the car. Walt Pereira has his money. The rest is between you and the process. I walked to the front door. My aunt said my name quietly, and I thought there was something in her voice that was not entirely on my mother's side of the room. I noted it and kept moving. Donnie said nothing. Gerald said nothing. Gerald has attended enough Teller Road situations to know when the thing is finished. I walked out, down the driveway, and got in my car at the curb. I sat for a moment with both hands on the wheel and let the quiet settle in. The kind of quiet that arrives when something you have been carrying leaves your hands for good. Then I drove the 12 minutes back to Ellsworth and put the Mustang away. Here's where things ended up. Walt Pereira received his $27, $500 back from me within 48 hours of our first phone call. I recovered that amount through the civil complaint process over the following 2 months. My mother was required to provide full restitution, paid across 3 installments from savings she had spent years building. The criminal referral for fraudulent property transfer is on her record. It was not escalated to prosecution. Walt and I both declined to push past the civil resolution, and the attorney structured an outcome centered on full repayment rather than further punishment. That was the right call. I am not in the business of maximizing damage. I am in the business of correct outcomes. Here is the part I find worth noting. The $27,500 my mother paid to Donnie to clear his debt, the amount she extracted from my property to make that payment, is now the exact amount she had to repay from her own savings to resolve the complaint. She did not transfer the debt to me. She transferred it to herself, and she paid it from the money she had been building for years, the same savings she would have used to help Donnie if she had simply written him a check in the first place without taking my car. The debt got paid, just not from my pocket. Donnie contributed nothing to the $27,500 restitution. This surprised no one, including Donnie. He spent approximately 2 weeks treating me with the mild hostility of a man who knows he is wrong and has decided the correct response to that knowledge is to be mildly unpleasant in the general direction of the person he wronged until enough time has passed that he feels the situation has expired. Then he returned to his ordinary relationship with money, which has always been an optimistic and entirely consequence-free one. Aunt Viv called me 3 weeks after Tuesday on Teller Road. She said she wanted to understand what had actually happened, and I appreciated that she asked rather than assumed. I walked her through it. She said she had not realized the car was solely mine. She had assumed family property meant shared access, which she now understood was not how property titles work. I told her that was a reasonable assumption and that it was also incorrect as a matter of law. She said she supposed that was fair. She also said something I have thought about since. She said she had watched my mother for 30 years hand everything difficult over to me and everything comfortable over to Donnie, and she had told herself it was just my mother's way and that it probably did not bother me because I never seemed bothered. I told her that was the point. She sat with that quietly for a moment and then said she supposed it was. It was the most honest conversation I have had with anyone on my mother's side of the family in several years. My mother and I have spoken twice since then. Both conversations were short and careful, the way conversations are when two people are deciding how much of the old version of something to carry forward. She has not apologized. I have not asked for one, because an apology from someone who still does not understand what they did wrong is just more noise. And I have had enough noise. What I want is not an apology. What I wanted was the car back and the record corrected and the process complete. I have all three. The Mustang is in my garage on Ellsworth. I drove her last Sunday with the windows down, the rebuilt engine turning the way 4 years of weekends deserve to turn. The accordion folder is on the shelf above the driver's side door where it has always been. I stopped at the gas station on Madison on the way home and filled the tank and stood outside for a moment in the late afternoon with my hand on the roof and felt the residual warmth of the engine through the metal. 4 years is a long time to build something. It is long enough that the object stops being an object. It becomes a record of every Saturday you chose to be in the garage instead of somewhere easier. Every decision you made about what was worth your time. Every receipt you kept because you are the kind of person who keeps receipts. My mother thought she was selling a car. She was selling 31 years of evidence that her accounting was wrong. I think about the line sometimes. Your brother is worth more than you. Always has been. I think about what it costs a person to believe that about their own child for that many years and to say it out loud without hesitating. I think about the buyer's number already in the phone 3 weeks before I refused anything. The arrangement already made. The decision already settled before she ever asked me, which means the asking was not really asking. It was notification. You can know someone your whole life and still find out a thing you did not know. I do not think that is a tragedy. I think it is information. The same as any other kind. The kind that changes what you do next, not the kind that changes what has already happened. What has already happened is this. She sold my car, and I got it back, and the only reason she believed she could do it without consequences is that she had never once in 31 years seen me turn the knowledge I carry every single working day toward anything that involved her. She did not know what I knew. That was the only gap in her plan. It was enough. I put the spare key back on the hook inside the garage door. I turned the light off. The accordion folder sat on the shelf in the dark, same as it always had, same as it will. That is my story. If you have something in your life with your name on the paperwork, that paperwork is your protection. Do not leave spare keys in places you have not thought carefully about. And if someone in your family ever tries to tell you what you are worth in a room full of people who are watching, remember this. You do not have to argue. You just have to know what is in your folder. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.